Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is truth and how much of what we perceive as truth is a subjective versus an objective experience. So we get to talk about that. It'll be interesting, I think. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream and nourishing all your cells and your organs and bringing vital life energy throughout your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating all your cells, electrifying and energizing your electrons and your molecules, and connecting you with the world beyond. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining stress, tension, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very, very, very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation and to bring yourselves present right here, right now in this physical experience. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's another new week. They just keep happening, right? It's amazing how quickly time flies. So before we get started, well, no, let's just jump right in. So truth, what is it? What is truth? Um, we can speak of our own truths, and we can do that pretty comfortably, right? We can talk about, well, that's my truth. Um, but if anything, the political atmosphere over the past several years, at least, has put a whole new spin on truth. I remember Kellyanne Conway talked about alternate facts, and we hear about fake news all the time, and we've come to a place where it's very, very normal to question the status quo, to question the things that we read, that we hear, that we see, uh, and from that place of questioning, I think it impacts our psyche to be really questioning this notion of truth in the first place, and to recognize that in large part, a very large part, um, our experience of what's true and what's not true is subjective to a very great degree. I'm reminded of the story of and you may have heard all kinds of variations of this, and I don't know if I'm giving a perfect rendition of it, but of the 10 blind men who were describing an elephant, and one described it as the trunk of a tree because they were touching the legs of the elephant, and another was touching the tail and was talking about the string and the rope, and etc. So each person's experience of this elephant was bounded by their, their direct sensate interpretations, and it was only a part of the picture. And so I find it really interesting and expansive and disorienting and sometimes disquieting as well, to recognize that we we get to see portions of the picture, and based on the portions of the picture that we see, we make different judgments, we make different interpretations. Good morning, Rosalind. Wonderful to start the week with you. Great to have you here as always. Thank you. And so we're talking about truth, and how over the past several years at least, our notion of truth as any kind of absolute has really eroded quite substantially, and recognizing that truth is a function of perspective to a great degree. I mean, even with, maybe even especially with news and with with the information that we are subject to, we are seeing a portion of a picture. And the portions of the picture that we're seeing, not only is it just a portion of the picture that we see, but we also see that portion of the picture through the filter that is being delivered to us. So we know that we have conservative and liberal and right wing, and we have all these different perspectives. And those become, if we look at the political realm, those become the filters through which our information is delivered. And we often don't recognize the filter that is behind the information we're receiving. Good morning, Tammy. Welcome. So good to have you here on this Monday morning. And um, now, Grace Isis, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. I think this is the first time I've seen your name. Welcome. It's so good to have you. So, we're talking about truth. And I guess the bottom line question is there such a thing in terms of truth as an absolute? And I wonder if it's something that we would have access to. So we can have our personal truths and we can have our personal perspectives. And I find it really interesting, especially looking at my own past, having been very dogmatic about certain perspectives and very righteous in certain perspectives, in believing, no, this is how it is. This is the truth. This is how things are. And I have come to you. If you've been with me on other occasions, you may have heard me talk about, well, this is my hypothesis. This is how I'm holding this truth with open hand. Because in the past, certainly the way that I have related to truth, and maybe even on certain occasions still, is with an arrogance and righteousness of being right. And, where we can argue political vantage points and perspectives. Um, and I think more and more I I'm recognizing that truth is something that is a subjective complex of experience, interpretation, belief, um, and emotion. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. If we talk about objective truth, there should be no emotion involved in it, right? It is the way it is. But the way that it is up for interpretation, it seems, to a very great degree anyway, from what I can understand. I mean, you can say these people were in this location at this particular time, it's documented, et cetera, that this was said, that was said. Maybe we can identify that kind of thing as truth, and then comes the interpretation, like then comes the assignment of meaning. And so maybe there are objective observations. However, even the objective observations can be very skewed, right? Because let's say there's this scene, and we're seeing this scene, and there these people in the foreground. We could be interpreting that the people in the foreground are more important, and where in fact what's really happening is in the background, for example. So Rosalind says, getting a portion, oh boy, here we go. This is kind of what spurred this on for me, Rosalind. So you just nailed it. Getting a portion of the truth when it comes to the regular clinical development of vaccines within the FDA didn't happen with COVID because of the emergency use authorization was issued. So I haven't taken it because I feel efficacy or side effects hasn't been fully disclosed. And actually, in here's opinion, I don't know that they can truly know the efficacy or the side effects because it's been in testing for such a short period of time. And it is still, all the vaccines are characterized as experimental vaccines. They're not yet approved. So um, nobody, I don't know if this is legally binding or not, but there's a Nuremberg, I don't know if it's called the Nuremberg Treaty or um, it may be, that says that no human being should be forced to undergo medical experimentation without their consent. And technically, this is the greatest human experiment ever to take place because these drugs are still experimental drugs, or the vaccines are still experimental vaccines. So I'm with you, Rosalind, in that I think that these vaccines were kind of rushed to market, and we don't know what the side effects are. We don't know what the implications are. There's the RNA um, technology that is being utilized that modifies our own DNA, I believe, and we don't know what the ramifications of that are going to be. So it's a very, very, very interesting dilemma, because statistically, and again, if we're talking about what's real and what's not real, or what's true and what's not true, statistically, we hear that the rates of COVID infection are rapidly declining in areas that have higher instances of vaccinations, but we also don't know how things are being reported or how they're being researched. I think there's a lot that we don't know, and it's really interesting because when I also have autoimmune, have historically had autoimmune issues, and the vaccines in general have been contraindicated in a lot of situations for people with autoimmune conditions, and so I don't take the flu vaccine or anything like that because I've heard that it could be dangerous for me. But I have a family member who, when they heard that I wasn't going to take the vaccine, and I have been researching this to my best ability and finding both sides, which is not so easy to do these days because it seems that there is quite a lot of censorship around it. But in when I told this family member that I wasn't going to be taking the vaccine, they got furious and tremendously upset because they were concerned that I was risking my life, that they didn't want me to die, and they thought that it would be a death sentence if I didn't take the vaccine. And that was this family member's truth. And it was based on the information that they had and the truth that they understood. And my position was based on the truth that I understand. And so Rosalind continues, FDA normal development is 10 years, including 3,000 volunteers, 2 years at a minimum follow-up for long-term adverse effects, per Dr. Malone, inventor of mRNA technology, Dr. Robert Malone. Thank you for that, Rosalind. So just for perspective, really interesting that you were looking at a normal development path that we have completely subverted and are effectively experimenting on millions and millions of humans, with the potential impact to be affecting our reproductive capacity and who knows what else. So it's all uh, very interesting to watch. Good afternoon, Pat. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you here with us. We're talking about truth and how when we believe we know the truth, how do we react to people when we believe we know the truth and they don't? And so in this case with my family member, they were so upset with me that they actually had to go out for a walk to calm down because I wasn't arguing. I was just saying not going to do that for me because I've done research, and in my situation I don't consider that it's going to be beneficial to my health. They were so deeply convinced that it was so deeply disturbing and upsetting to them that they had to go out for a walk to calm down, for instance. And then later, just sort of accepted my choice for myself, but with regret, feeling because of their belief that they knew the truth about this, that I was endangering myself. And so it's very, very interesting how we have in the past year, the past year and a half especially, we have all been bombarded by situation after situation. And it's not just the past year and a half, but situation after situation where we have been called upon to identify what's true and what's not true. I mean, climate change, uh, political claims, the election, whether the election was legitimately won or not. Uh, just the value of the vaccine, the danger of COVID, ways to treat COVID, on and on and on and on, all kinds of challenges to our sense of what's real or what's true and what's not true. And I wonder, how do we navigate this very when it seems that things used to be a lot more clear, and maybe it was because we were more ignorant in that we didn't have access to as many different vantage points on things as we currently have. Hello, hello, Elaine. Welcome, welcome. So good to have you here as always. We're talking about truth. And what it comes down to is finding an inner compass to navigate this, the polarity and the uncertainty. So in facing the uncertainty of all the different information that we are privy to or that we have access to, I think we get to establish priorities, because I know how easy it is to believe that something is true and then have a profoundly emotional response to it and feel in many cases disempowered, um, ineffectual, to feel at the effect of, to feel a victim of the circumstances or situation or the powers that be, or on and on, to create strength in our inner compass. And Grace Isa says navigation begins with knowing that the truth is within each individual, and one's wisdom beacon guides toward the understanding. Exactly, Grace Isis. That's kind of where I'm getting to, and it's maybe in deciding, is recognizing that it seems that certain things are true, but then recognizing or deciding where to put our attention and our energy. And we can either fall down the rabbit hole of all the, for lack of a better word at the moment, darkness that we perceive or as true or as existing, or we can look to how to bring light into those circumstances. And the other thing that I think is really important, as important as bringing light, is recognizing the need to hold these truths. I see in the United States, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And I think what's happening now is that not so many truths are self-evident anymore. And we get to hold them with open hand rather than believing this and I'm going to fight to the death. There may be things that are worth fighting to the death for, but I think that we get to hold our beliefs and our truths with open hand so that we have the opportunity to evaluate them and reevaluate them. It's much more convenient to be able to hold on to a truth and never assess it again and never question it, never challenge it. And yet at the same time, there are often legitimate reasons to continue to question. And so Rosalind says, a family member has labeled me as being irresponsible for not taking the vaccine. That's what was happening with my family member as well. And Rosalind says, I argued with him that you can still get sick if you're vaccinated, which is true. In fact, I know of someone who ended up in ICU after having been vaccinated with COVID. Came down with COVID after having been through the vaccination and ended up in the ICU. And Rosalind continues to say, the symptoms are just shortened. CDC on May 1st announced that it stopped counting all breakthrough cases. So, breakthrough cases are people who have gotten COVID after the vaccine and only report on cases that lead to hospitalization or death. So, this goes to the idea of truth. We are made to believe that this vaccine is effective, and yet we're not collecting the data to potentially challenge that perception, right? So, and so Rosalind continues, so truth for me means holding my ground, even if I'm criticized. Ultimately, what we get to do is to check in and feel if our ground is our ground still. I think that we can get into holding our ground as a matter of pride versus a matter of information. I mean, if certain information came out that made me believe that this was safe and that it would make a difference for me, then I might change my mind. But I think we need to be true to ourselves above all else. Above all else, to thine own self be true, right? Saying a few platitudes, they're not really platitudes. Platitudes become platitudes because they're true, right? Anyway, Elaine says, this is a beautiful time now as more and more are connecting back to themselves as the distortions are cleared and the clarity and wisdom from within and know the truth. So I think I agree with you, Elaine, that we are being called to rely more and more upon our inner compass. And hopefully we are reclaiming our sovereignty, reclaiming our autonomy, and we're reclaiming our capacity to make higher level discernments. And I think that these discernments don't come from the head, they come from the heart. And the head is going to be buffeted about by bias and by belief, and we we get to connect more deeply to our deepest intuition and our deepest sense of knowing, to guide ourselves with that compass, with that as our North Star. And Grace Isis says, perhaps our society has become so verbal that we forget that the journey is individualistic and surrounded in love. And that's certainly the ideal. I believe that because so many of us get caught up in our minds, we get disconnected from love, and we get disconnected from that clarity and direction of the balanced heart. And so Grace Isis says, yes, 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 check in with self, indeed. And Elaine says, when one connects to the inner guidance and truly trusts themselves, one will one will know what is for your best in ever now. And I'm inclined to agree with you, Elaine, that we have a knowing if we can quiet ourselves and find ourselves in a balanced heart. And I mean, like, really connected to heart, not emotion, connected to heart, not the passion of belief and getting all caught up in that. And Rosalind is replying to Grace Isis, suppressing one's emotions is just as bad as being overly expressive with them. I agree. And we're not looking about suppressive emotion here or suppressing emotion. What we're looking at is is finding some kind of place of balance in the knowingness that our heart has to offer. And Grace Isis says, and travel with ease. Yes, yes, yes. Discernment, because we know. I believe we do. And Elaine says, it's truly simple. Live by fear or divine love. All is a choice. And so we get to be discerning. That's really what it comes down to. And questioning. We get to um, think guided by a balanced heart. And there's a greater call now to connect with our deepest knowing than there ever has been, in my opinion. So um, that's hopefully what we do here, is connect authentically and deeply and move from that place. So we get to discover and explore truth and question, and that's kind of our responsibility as far as I can tell. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I go live here with Maggie each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, it is such a profound pleasure and privilege to spend this time with you. And I hope you'll come back again really soon. So much love to you.